This meeting is being held in compliance with the Brown Act. SCAG offices are open for members of the public to attend and participate in person. Instructions for providing public comment have been provided in advance and are also included in the agenda packet. If a member of this body is attending remotely but is not at a location specified on the agenda, they may observe and comment as a member of the public, but may not participate in any member discussion or voting of this body. For all members participating remotely, please ensure your microphone is muted when not in use. Please state your name during deliberations and whether making a motion or offering a second. Any voting member or member of the public calling into this meeting by telephone can press *6 to mute and unmute. All telephone participants should identify themselves prior to speaking. SCAG encourages all members of the public to participate in its meetings. We are committed to holding meetings accessible to people with disabilities. For members of the public requiring ADA accommodation, please call 213-630-1410. SCAG offers free interpretation services for members of the public needing information in another language. Please call 213-236-1895. The meeting will now begin.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. It's Thursday, June 4th, 2026, and I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the Energy and Environment Committee, and as a reminder, if a member of this body is attending remotely but is not at the location specified on the agenda, they may observe and comment as a member of the public, but may not participate in any member discussion or voting of this body. So in-house, if the Honorable Jenny Crosswhite would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
And on your part, and repeat after me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And thank you very much. So clerk, do we have a quorum today?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we do.
Oh, excellent. So our online audience must be larger than our in-house audience today. But I'm glad you're here, Margaret. Thank you. All right, so we'll move on. We're going to open it up right now for the public comment period, comments that were received prior to the meeting, for comments for matters not on the agenda. Do we have any comments submitted?
No comments.
And any comments in attendance requested or online? Oh, we don't do public online, do we? Only from the locations listed. Okay. All right, great. So we'll go ahead and we got that done. We'll move on from that. All right, so in order to save some time, if anybody wants to pull anything off the consent agenda or calendar, see, I asked the staff present before moving. I'll have staff present that item before moving to the roll call vote for the consent calendar. Is there anyone like to pull an item from consent? Hearing none online, no one in attendance.
I'll move consent, Chair.
All right, thank you. Ramos moved and Crosswhite second. So roll call vote on the item, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll proceed with roll call. Annabelle Tran. Art Bishop. Daniel Brotman. Margaret Clark.
Yes.
Robert Copeland. Jenny Crosswhite.
Yes.
Ned Davis, Rick Dennison,
Dennison, yes.
Victoria Garcia, Carmen Hernandez.
Yes.
Thank you. Sherry Horn,
Aye.
Britt Huff,
Here. Can you hear me? Britt Huff is here.
Around 10:30, we'll be joined by golfers for town general conference update, followed by the legislative advocate I've worked with for several years now from the California Joint Powers Authority Association. Kind of going.
Thank you. Okay. Brian Joes, Stephen Leash, Elaine Litzer.
Here.
Thank you, Member Litzer. Just to confirm, was that a yes for the consent calendar?
I'm sorry. Yes, that is a yes for the consent calendar. I thought, yes, apologies.
Vianney Lopez, Yasmin Emmanuel, Daniel Ramos,
Ramos, yes.
Jeanette Sanchez Palacios,
Yes.
Suli Saro, Patty Senecal,
Yes.
Jennifer Stark,
Yes.
Ali Taj.
Here.
Thank you, Member Taj. Just to confirm, that was for the consent calendar. Was your vote yes?
Yes, correct.
Thank you. Connor Trout, Dale Welty. Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, the item for consent passes with 12 votes yes, 0 votes no, and 0 abstentions.
Thank you for the count. Just confirming that the beginning of the roll call vote, that you did receive a reply from all the members in attendance.
Members in attendance.
I missed a couple of the first names. I didn't hear the reply.
Okay, should I can redo it.
If, or is it shown that like our bishop is in attendance?
Our bishop is in attendance, but I did not hear a vote.
Okay. Could you recheck with those
Sure,
first
sure.
three members?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to recall the few first members for consent. Anna Beltran, Art Bishop, Daniel Brotman. Okay, and so the next one would be Margaret Clark, but I did capture the votes from then on. So
Were you able to get my vote, Britt Huff?
Brett Huff, I did.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear us from Signal Hill?
Signal Hill.
Yes, this is Suli Saro, attending at City of Signal Hill. And my vote is an aye for consent.
And Robert Copeland is also in Signal Hill. Yes, for consent, and I'm present.
Okay, so with that, Mr. Chair, the consent vote changes to 14 votes yes, 0 no's, and 0 abstentions.
All right.
This is Dale Welty. I'm not sure I was on at the time of the vote, but I vote yes.
Thank you. I got you, Mr.
Become panelists, that's what, so they just accepted.
Sorry, this is Brian Jost from Chino Hills. I'd be a yes as well. Sorry.
So I got Welty as a yes, Joe's as a yes.
We're just shaking the rust off. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, sorry about it.
All right.
It's been a couple months.
I see Art Bishop just joined. I'll give him a moment. Mr. Bishop, did you want to cast your vote for consent?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so I got that as a yes. Okay.
All right. Thank you for confirming the consent vote. And if any member just for in the attendance on the future items, their presentations, but if you have any comment, please reach out again by signaling with your hand raised and we'll make sure that you're heard. Thank you. So we'll go ahead and move on. So consent done. We'll check on the approval of the minutes, which is item number 1. Oh, and consent, I'm sorry. Yeah, this thing is still like. It's okay. All right, thank you very much for your patience, everyone. So information items, our first information item is agenda item 3, Connect SoCal 2024 Implementation Strategies Update. And our presenter will be Leslie Caton.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, committee members. My name is Leslie Caton. I am an Associate Regional Planner here at SCAG, and I'll be providing an update on the Connect SoCal 2024 implementation strategies. So last November, we provided an update on some of the major milestones on the implementation strategies included in the adopted Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy, also known as Connect SoCal 2024. Now, a quick overview on Connect SoCal 2024. It was adopted in April of 2024. It is a document that addresses both federal and state requirements. It is updated every 4 years, which means the next update we are anticipating to adopt in 2028. We are required to forecast out to or plan for a horizon of 20 plus years, and the plan is required to be financially constrained. So today I am back here to provide a fourth and verbal update on the new milestones that SCAG has achieved. So for context, direct implementation of Connect SoCal 2024 primarily relies on the actions and decisions of other transportation agencies, local jurisdictions, and actors in the private sector to operate transit service, install new bike lanes, approve new land uses, or build a new housing. And SCAG takes a leadership role in establishing the regional vision and goals, identifying policy strategies and funding to reach those goals. Now, there are 4 primary ways that we support our partners in implementation. First being through collaboration and policy leadership, where we coordinate policy efforts across jurisdictions and stakeholders. Through state and federal funding administration, where we ensure that state and federally funded transportation projects and programs support Connect SoCal and assist the region in advancing key performance measures. Through data collection, analysis, and research that help further policy advancement, and through local technical assistance resources, such as providing funding and resources for local government through programs like Go Human, the Sustainable Communities Program, the Regional Early Action Planning or REAP program, and the Local Information Services Program to enable jurisdictions to advance Connect SoCal goals in their communities. Now, the detailed report in your agenda packet includes milestone progress for 71 implementation strategies, and in total, since adoption, SCAG has progressed on 84 of the 93 strategies since adoption. Much of this work was advanced individually through the policy committees, so thank you all, in the release of various tools, reports, and approval of funding. The report serves as a comprehensive summary of all that work since our update, and I'll highlight a few recent accomplishments considering this committee's focus. So SCAG, I'm happy to say that SCAG released the Regional Resilience Toolkit, which shares resources, information to support Southern California communities, cities, and counties with resilience planning. That is also linked in the report if you'd like to take a look at it. SCAG also kicked off the Smart Cities Strategic Plan effort, which will explore and recommend clean and innovative technology solutions that help reduce VMT, GHG emissions, and support several strategies that span the mobility, environment, and economy goal pillars. And this past March, SCAG Regional Council approved an initial list of projects under the Last Mile Freight Program, Measure 2.2, also known as rebate program, also known as the Invest Clean Rebate Program. So that was a really short summary of some accomplishments. So with progress being made on the Connect SoCal implementation strategies, staff will continue our efforts to complete this work while we also shift focus to the development of Connect SoCal 2050, which will be the next iteration of the plan. We do intend, or SCAG intends, to leverage the work that's being done and develop and build on the accomplishments of these strategies for next plan development. So that concludes my verbal update. Thank you for your time. I'm not sure if there's time to take questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I really admire the work that's been done so far to practically accomplish the entire list of nearly 100 items. So that's a lot to do, and it's starting to be noticed. So thank you for that. We'll open it up for public comments on this item. No notice is seen. So we'll bring it back to the committee. Are there any questions from committee members of the presenter?
No reason.
I don't see any hands raised. Okay, well, thank you very much for the
Thank
presentation.
you.
So our next item on agenda today is another presentation, item number 4 on the agenda, overview of transportation conformity and anticipated regional conformity challenges in our SCAG region. And we will have Lin Jin Sun, please, SCAG Planning Supervisor.
In the meantime, I'm just going to introduce myself. My name is Li Jun Sun. Thanks, Chair, and thanks to the committee member. Thanks for the opportunity to present you today. Li Jun Sun, I supervise the air quality planning and conformity program at SCAG. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Looks like got you going.
Got me going. All right.
Perfect.
So today I have the pleasure to discuss conformity with you all and talk about what it is, how it works, why it matters, why it is so complicated, and the challenges the region is going to face in the next couple of years. Before I dive into the details, I do want to mention a few points, and you're going to hear me mention those points throughout the presentation. First, conformity is very technical and complex. It's related to air quality, which is also very complex, but we need to stay on top of it because it is a federal requirement for SCAG as the designated planning metropolitan planning organization. It also matters to individual projects, including transit projects that are being built in our communities. And because conformity is tied to federal funding and federal approval for those projects. Second, federal conformity requirements are getting harder, challenging to comply, not because SCAG or member agencies are doing less. It's because the federal air quality bar continues to rise, coupled with the ever-changing regulatory environment. So all of these are underscoring the greater need that we need a stronger support from our federal and state agency partners. Okay, so today's goals are simple. Explain conformity in plain terms and warn you about a potential challenge that the region is going to face in the next couple of years. So conformity, like I said, is a federal requirement. It's part of the Federal Clean Air Act. Basically, how it works is that it's a consistency check. It's to check that our transportation decisions and activities do not compromise federal clean air goals. We demonstrate conformity on a very regular basis, and we had to comply with US EPA conformity regulations. And one of the reasons why conformity is very technical is because there are 5 federal required conformity tests. These tests are in front of you, and all these tests are to make sure that our conformity, our transportation decisions and programmings support and align with the federal clean air goals. And all the individual transportation projects, including transit projects within our plan, also support that alignment. And very important thing to remember is that we have to pass all 5 tests. If we fail one test, the whole thing fails. We do not meet the conformity. Okay, that's a concept I would like you to remember because I'm going to go back to it. Another reason why conformity is very complex and hard to understand is our region is large, diverse, and complex. There are 25 areas within our region that are being required by EPA to meet the nation's toughest air quality standards for 3 pollutants. And these criteria pollutants are ozone, particulate matter, and carbon monoxide. These criteria pollutants affect individual health, but also affect the quality of the greater environment across a very large 6 county areas. Okay. Another reason why it's complex is because there are a lot of chefs in the kitchen. And conformity is not SCAG's job alone. It is a shared responsibility across all government levels. For example, federal government set the standards and provide modeling tools and provide technical guidance how to use those tools. And they also approve our RTP and federal FTIP documents. But at the same time, SCAT and local agencies conduct those technical analysis and implement the projects. So because there's a lot of chefs in the kitchen, when there's a problem, everybody have to be involved. And a lot of time, those actions take a long time to implement because those actions have to be complete sometimes concurrently at the same time across all government agency levels. But sometimes one agency has to complete what it needs to be done before moving the action to the next agency. The next agency starts its own process. So even if we have a solution to a challenge, it takes time to implement that solution. So it's very, very important that all the agencies involved in conformity have an open dialogues so that we can anticipate issue early, identify a pathway forward to resolve the issue, but also make sure that we can find ways to cut the time to implement that solution, and so that the issue does not become a real problem for the region. So this is a slide that's very important. This is a slide why I'm here in front of you. So you might have heard from the news that a lot of actions have taken place over the last year and a half. These actions happen both at the state and federal levels. For example, state of California voluntarily withdrew a waiver under the Clean Air Act, January 2025 at the tail end of the last administration. Then a couple of months later, upon the new administration, the federal government rescinded several key waivers for mobile source regulations that the state used to have. And fast forward to early this year, the US EPA discounted the emission reduction credits of another major mobile source regulation that the state has. So what all these actions have done to us is that they have taken away the regulatory emission benefits that we used to rely on for meeting emission standards and meeting conformity requirements. So that's why I'm here. So the challenge associated with that elimination of the benefits is that SCAT is going to face a growing conformity challenge. And that challenge is why I'm here in front of you. And that is related to the South Coast AQMD's air plan. That air plan, it was developed around 2020, 2021, submitted to EPA in early 2022. So let's call it a 2022 air plan. So that 2022 air plan was developed to address a federal ozone standard. And that air plan covers the entirety of the AQMD's jurisdiction, which includes a portion called Coachella Valley. And this air plan includes a component that's relevant to SCAT's work. And that component is called emission budgets. So that emission budgets basically is the maximum emissions that transportation activities within SCAT's purview are allowed to emit. When you do the math, you have family budget, your expenditure cannot go above the budget. So that is the budget, okay, emission budget. So how it works is that the state agency, the California Air Resources Board, sets that budget, adopts it, move that to EPA for a review and approval. Once EPA reviews and approves that budgets become the legal requirement that SCAT has to comply. Until then, we are not required to use it. But that's a concept I want you to remember because it's going to tie to the next slide, okay? So like I said, this air plan was developed in 2020, 2021. All the regulatory changes that happened last year were not reflected originally in that plan. So that plan, including the budgets, were updated this year. So we call it 2026 updates. These updates were to reflect all those regulatory changes that I just mentioned to you earlier, right? So there's one change I do want to note for the record. That change happened after these slides were published. That change is that CARB Governing Board was scheduled to consider adoption of the air plan and the budgets originally at its May meeting. Now that day has been moved to later this month. So they continue the item for about a month till June 26, 2026. So if you have a pen in front of you, scratch out the 528, write down 626. That is a new governing board day for CARB to consider adoption of that plan and including the budgets that's relevant to SCAT's work. Okay, so why there's a problem? The problem is that the budgets for Coachella valleys are too small. We cannot meet it. Why? Because all the regulatory benefits are being taken away by the federal and the state actions. Not because SCAG is doing less, not because we're rolling back our regional policies. To the contrary, SCAG and its member agency continue to advance our aggressive and ambitious investments around transportation efforts. So it's really something that's above and beyond what SCAG can do. So even though CARB board has delayed the consideration of the action on the air plan and the unworkable budgets, but the nature of the impact hasn't changed. As soon as CARB adopts the plan and the unworkable Coachella Valley budgets, they're going to move this item to EPA. EPA has about a bit time, about 18 months under the Clean Air Act to conduct a review. If EPA adopts a plan, including the unworkable Coachella Valley budgets, those budgets will become legal requirement for SCAG to use. Okay, so it's going to be a little time. So we can see the cliff, but then we're not there by the edge yet. So there are no immediate impacts to SCAG's transportation planning activity this year, nor are there any impact to our region's readiness supporting the LA28 Games. But we can see the cliff. We have some time before we get to the edge. So it's very important that we keep that in mind. So there are time to provide some additional working together with all the agencies involved. Oh, sorry. All right, let me fast forward. So that's why I'm here, to letting you know what we're doing right now. So what we are doing is, these are not next steps. These are the current steps. These are the things that staff has already actively engaging with all the agencies that need to be involved, identify who's who within the agency that need to be at the discussion tables, identify any practical solutions to resolve the issue before they become a real problem for us, and making sure that there are ways we're doing correctly by the law. We're not cutting short on the process, but we also make sure that we can save time so that those issues do not become an impact for us. The reason it's very significant is that if the emissions budgets become a legal requirement, since we cannot meet it, then we will not be able to pass one of the tests. And that test is called regional emissions analysis. Just like you're doing math, your results is higher than what you're allowed to spend, right? So you fail the test. Because you fail one test, you fail the whole thing. Because we fail the whole thing, then nothing is moving, meaning SCAG cannot make new conformity determinations. And all the transportation projects, most of the transportation projects, including transit projects, including the plan, can also not move forward. So what that means is they may face delay in federal approval. They may also face withholding of federal funding until we resolve the issue, until we have the workable budget for the SCAG region. So that is why I see the cliff. The drop is pretty deep, but we have some time to try to work it out before it becomes a real problem for us. All right. That's the end of my presentation. I know I give you really technical information, and I will do my best to answer any questions you may have for me.
No, it's very thought-provoking. It was a great presentation. Thank you very much. So first I'll ask, are there any public comments on this item? Seeing none here. So I'll bring it back to our committee, and I see Margaret with your request up to speak.
Yes, this is so apropos. You can't believe it. Jennifer Stark is on the committee, and I want her to weigh in also. She's the chair of our San Gabriel Valley COG Energy Environment Committee that we met yesterday. And at that committee, I'll get into the issue a bit later. Michael Cacciati is our AQMD rep, and he brought an issue to us that's just mind-boggling. And you said it has to do, when you said that there's too many chefs in the kitchen, there must be concurring with the next agency. And when he said the issue is with the CARB, California Air Resources Board, I have to share with you my experience with them in the early 90s. The biggest I told you so of my life was when they wanted to clean up the air and they mandated MTBE, methyl tertiary butyl ether, in the gasoline. And our League of Cities had us meet with a gentleman from CARB. And I helped form the San Gabriel Basin Water Quality Authority for the cleanup of the groundwater. And so I'm totally into water. And our people were saying, this is going to get in the groundwater. It moves faster than water and whatever. And I said that to the guy from CARB. And he said, oh no, we're just going to double line all the storage tanks and shore up all the pipelines. And I said, even if you could do that, what about an earthquake? But anyway, the point is that within very short time, virtually all of Santa Monica's water wells had to be shut down because they were contaminated MTBE. And the total cost to clean it up, because the Air Resources Board people were not talking to the water people, $29 billion. And that is money that could have helped the environment in other ways. So when you're talking about what they apparently they have mandated that, and I hope Jennifer will help me with telling about what the actual trucks are doing, but he said the issue with them is there's a mandate about the trucks, the heavy duty trucks that have to by 2027 or something be certain emission free, whatever. But there's nobody manufacturing them. There is a company that takes a truck and changes it and fixes it that way, but that's going to take a long time. So this was, we were all just blown away. Think, how can this happen? And we wanted to be able to send a letter to them and say, look into this, revisit this, do something, but it wasn't on our agenda, so we didn't, But I don't know if Jennifer wants to jump in, because it's really an issue that when you said that about the chefs in the kitchen and not talking to each other, that's just, yeah.
Well, thank you, Margaret, for those comments. We do have another person online. I don't see any other signs raised here. So we'll go to the Honorable Art Bishop.
Good morning, and thank you very much. Margaret, you are right on line. I also want to thank Mrs. Sun. There too many chefs in the kitchen is a great way of saying we are totally over-regulating some of the items that are coming down before us from Sacramento. I do just want to make a quick question. I know for most of you, you're in South Coast Air Quality Control. We're very fortunate here in the high desert of San Bernardino County that we have our own Mojave Air Quality Control District. And they use a tremendous amount, a lot of compliments to their board of directors. They use a tremendous amount of common sense looking at our region and our air quality control rules and regulations. So sometimes it's like the dog is wagging the tail is wagging the dog, but it's just that there just seems to be so many regulatory issues. The other thing, Mrs. Sun, is how are the Olympics not affecting air quality control, or we just haven't got to a point where we've studied it yet?
Thank you for the questions. I'm going to address the first one. I do want to make a note that the cliff that I can see, it's called regional conformity lockdown, meaning even though the issue occurred as a result of Coachella Valley area, it's going to affect everybody in the region because we're making one regional conformity determination, not piecemealing, just one. So if some of the members were here about 4 years ago, we also had a similar regional conformity lockdown, which also triggered by Coachella Valley. That delayed some of the actions we had to do 4 years ago. We were fortunate to resolve it. Unfortunately, the solutions that we were able to use at that time are no longer viable this time. Okay, so even though it's San Bernardino, Mojave Desert AQMD versus South Coast AQMD, we are really in this together on the same boat. If anything, we're also on the same boat with Caltrans, not only their district people, but also their headquarters, because it's also going to impact not only the highway projects, but also transit projects. So that's the first question that I hope I have answered. The second question is that how come Olympic Games are not being impacted? But because a lot of projects are already advancing right now or last year. So remember, it's going to take some time before we get to the cliff, at minimum another 18 months, because EPA has 18 months under the statute to conduct a review. We are talking to them and urging them not to expedite their review so that they can fully understand the transportation implications for all of us. So I'm hoping we're still working through that channel, working through the issue with them. So because it's going to be another 18 months at a minimum at the EPA level, and by that time, we're already going to be celebrating the Olympics. That's why it's not going to impact the region's readiness supporting the Olympics. Hopefully that answers your question, Member Bishop.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And next hand up is going to be Mayor Jennifer Stark. You're on.
Hi, thank you so much for the opportunity. I just wanted to confirm what Maggie was saying, and that is in the in SCAG's EENR committee, there was a discussion about the inconsistencies between the industries that are making EV heavy equipment that cities are mandated to purchase for their fleet by 2027. In the last 3 years, that equipment is not being manufactured. And so the committee is going to look into trying to get more guidance from CARB with what are the expectations when you can't purchase them. So there definitely does seem to be some confusion at a regional level compared to the state level, getting having recommendations to be compliant and actually being compliant in our current manufacturing environment. I don't know if that helped clear anything up or not, but thank you for bringing it up, Maggie, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to add to the conversation.
Thank you very much for your comments. Next hand up, I see Member Patty Senecal.
Yes, thank you. The question I have has to do with the regional analysis test and the cliff that we're approaching. How does the housing element work into all this? You have all the construction emissions if stuff is being built, but also with the housing projects bringing more cars. So our state policy is build it, but yet we have this other policy about reduce it. So I mean, how does this work together to regarding the cliff that we're approaching?
So the cliff is really directly involved with the RTP, the transportation planning side. So it's less on the SCS side. So that's why it's very important to remember conformity is a federal requirement. The SCS is the state requirement, SB 375. However, we do consider all the dust from construction and on-road from all those activities into our model. And that information is provided to us from the air districts. So what we do is we use our travel demand model to analyze all the emissions of the transportation within SCAG purview into the model for travel. And we get the output from that model, put that into a second model. That second model is called emission model. It's called MFAT. You might have heard that before. All the MPOs, all the agencies in the state of California are required to use this model. And that model is, I did not mention in my slide, is that model is required to be updated every 5 years or so. And we have to use an EPA approved model. So right now, the approved version is MFAT 2021, but that model has to be updated to reflect all those regulatory changes that happened over the year and so there are a lot, it's very complex that, yes, it's regulatory changes, but it's affecting how we calculate emissions because the model has changed. So that's why it's complicated.
So when will the MFAC model be updated?
Already being updated last November to reflect all the regulatory changes. And it has updated again earlier this year to reflect another change that EPA did this year. There's a next version of the model. It's maybe in the next couple of years. We are working through that next version model. We might have another challenge associated with that model, but that's later. That's the next cliff. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you for mentioning the next cliff. Yeah.
There are 5 cliffs.
A cliff on the way down to the cliff.
There are 5 cliffs, one at a time.
So any other questions? I have one if I
Sure.
may. I don't see any other hands raised. So one of the things I'm trying to clear up in my head, and you just brought it up. So we're talking about the PM, the 2.5, the 10, all those things are aggregated and put together with our other emissions that we're talking about, GHG and that kind of stuff too. So there's a formula, correct? That the EPA brings to us to use as like the point of achievement. That's what we're trying to get, at least there or lower, of course, to 0 would be great. But then we on top, we're right now not actually, even though we do build models to reduce emissions in many ways, whether it's development, roads, vehicle, VMT, all these things that we're doing, it's really just to continue our development and continue our transportation, but we have to lower those emissions to get underneath that. So it's not that California has cleaner air, it's just that we're creating these new models to stay under that threshold. And so with that, and we have different areas too. So South Coast and Mojave are our 2 air quality management districts, and they're just trying to achieve those EPA goals, correct?
No, these are for the entire, well, there's something for each air district.
Each region is a little different. They're numbers, but they're the ones that are monitoring those areas. Because as you said, a real growth in some of the particulates and emissions has been our Coachella Valley neighbors, to the south. And some of those things we don't really have any control over, sand dunes and there's a reason windmills are there because it's windy all the time. And so those are kind of cyclical numbers. They're not, I don't know if you could really calculate that, or is there a carve out under those EPA requirements to where, acts of nature are not something that, how do we stop that? You should see the walls they try and build to stop the blowing sand. It just blows over the wall. It's just kicking the can down the road. So that was my one comment of how do we do that?
So that's a really good comment. I'm gonna be a little technical. So each agency has our own regulatory purview. So for South Coast, it's really the area source or stationary sources. So that means power plants, medical facility, gasoline stations, as well as the sand blowing that you mentioned, the area source, the whole area. That's their purview. Okay, they have their control strategies. Even though their control strategies plus our transportation strategies have be added together to meet the air quality standard. Okay, but the emission budget that I mentioned is only for our piece. It's only for transportation.
Okay.
But the transportation has multiple layers. You have on-road, you have off-road, you have the aircraft, ocean-going vessels, and railroads. So these federal sources are not our jobs, right? And off-road, not our jobs. Only the on-road.
Okay, because that's federal land.
That's right.
But
Federal purview.
But those particulates come into our purview too, right?
Mhm.
During those rating periods, whatever they are. So it's very complex.
It's very complex. Yeah. And then there are another thing you mentioned, it's called exceptional events. For example, we have a fire early last year, and these can get exempted. But it takes some regulatory decisions or declarations before they can, get approved by EPA, get exempted. So there are ways to also July 4th that's coming up. We have a lot of fireworks, PMs.
Okay.
Typically consider
So we
exception
do
events.
have a workaround for things that are legitimately, basically,
Yeah.
there are now abnormalities in those numbers. So
Yeah.
that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah. Mhm.
Any other questions? That was wonderful. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
your presentation.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to our next item as item number 5 on your agenda, Innovative Clean Transit Regional Assessment Study Update. And we are going to have our presenter, Priscilla Fruda. I don't want to tear up the name, Matt? I don't know how to pronounce it properly. I'm so sorry.
You did great. Thank you.
Oh.
Good morning, Chair and members of the EEC. I'm excited to be here to share additional updates on the Innovative Clean Transit Regional Assessment Study that we kicked off last year, and we have been providing you updates. It's exciting that we're almost at the end, and so this morning I just want to give you a couple of updates on where we are at this time. So in 2018, the California Air Resources Board, so we're talking about CARB again, adopted the Innovative Clean Transit Regional Assessment Study with two primary requirements. The first one was that transit agencies had to develop a zero-emission bus rollout plan, and then to meet the pitches requirements specified by transit agency type by different sizes by a specific year as part of the effort to meet the overall state goal of a 100% zero emission transition by 2040 deadline. And so last year in June, SCAG initiated the ICT, or the Innovative Clean Transit Regional Assessment Study, to build on the ongoing efforts of our transit agencies in our region and to assess the gaps that exist and also explore opportunities for coordination to continue to support the transit agencies towards the zero emission future we envision. Since June last year, the project team has conducted stakeholder engagement. We have provided you some updates the last couple of meetings as to some of those findings from there. We talked to transit agencies, bus manufacturers, utility and infrastructure providers to understand the challenges and opportunities that exist. And we also conducted best practices and existing conditions research just to better understand whether the SCAG region is really ready for this zero emission transit future that we envision. All of these efforts informed the implementation action plan that I'll be sharing a few additional details on today to guide zero emission transition, and that would also feed into the study's final report and a toolkit that we have developed as part of the study to help transit agencies better transition to zero emission vehicles in a region. So overall, from the stakeholder engagement and also from the project research, some of the key challenges that we came across was the gaps in the zero emission bus rollout plans and how they align with planning frameworks overall. There's also operational and technological barriers. We also did note the policy, regulatory, and institutional challenges that exist, and also some of the funding and physical barriers. But in all of these, there's some opportunities, for example, to help us strengthen the zero emission bus rollout plans that are required to be developed by these transit agencies to better align this with the overall planning framework across the jurisdictions and the transit agencies. And this is also to help to improve some of the decision-making across the transit agencies and to promote more agency collaboration throughout. We also do note an opportunity to collaborate with these remission tracks wherever they exist to see whether transit agencies can coordinate with the tracks as well. In terms of readiness, we saw that readiness is really uneven across the SCAG region and also across different dimensions. So for example, in terms of policy and planning, we do note that the SCAG region is that when you compare us to some of the other regions or MPOs even across the state, a lot has happened when it comes to zero emission deployment in our region compared to the others across the state. So that's a good thing to note. But we do see that, for example, the large transit agencies, mainly the LA Metros, the Foothill and others, they see those rollout plans that are being developed as strategic plans, whereas the small transit agencies are just mainly doing it for compliance. And so you would see that a lot of the transit agencies are moving ahead quickly to make sure that they advance through these strategic plans developed through those rollout plans to make sure the deployments happen. There are multiple tiers of leadership, from planning phase agencies to those that are still emerging, trying to figure out where they fit, to mature implementers across the region. And then in terms of workforce and operational readiness overall, it's very different. The large transit agencies are approaching this more holistically because, again, most of them are already deploying these zero emission vehicles, so they have to find a way to make sure the workforce also do work to coordinate across, so the workforce can meet the operational needs of these new technology that's being deployed. But we also do note that overall funding there's a lot of uncertainty related to zero emission funding overall, which makes it a little difficult for especially the smaller transit agencies to think about the plans and even how to deploy zero emission overall. But All of these initial analyses have supported the implementation action plan that we developed as part of the study to guide zero emission deployments in our region. And we hope that this would provide sort of a guideline for our transit agencies as they think about zero emission deployments overall. The actions that are specified in the implementation action plan is meant to clarify technology pathways in the near term. We hope to be able to encourage more collaboration throughout across all stakeholders in the midterm, and then in the long term, promote sort of a regional supporting program for the transit agencies to be able to advance this technology future. We outlined 5 goals in the action plan, which also aligns with Connect SoCal goals. And we also identified key stakeholders to lead and support the implementation of the goals, and as well as the objectives and the actions that are associated with them. And so for goal 1, to strengthen regulatory readiness and technology advancements that would help to accelerate zero emission deployment. Some of the key actions include the development of a playbook that's already included in the study toolkit, which I'll talk about briefly towards the end. In the near term, we'll look forward to having some sort of a procurement and technical support in the midterm, and a regional readiness dashboard coordinated through the Regional Transit Technical Advisory Committee in the long term. The lead stakeholders will be the Air Resources Board and the transit agencies, and with several of these identified supporting stakeholders. For goal 2, improve infrastructure planning. This is meant to help build reliable, resilient zero-emission infrastructure through planning, coordination, and corridor strategies led by the transit agencies. For goal 3, we're looking forward to creating more sustainable funding. Some of the key things that were discussed with regards to the CARB and the CALSTA Transit Transformation Task Force related to providing sustainable funding for zero emission deployment. And so we're hoping that through goal 3, we'll be able to create more sustainable funding for zero emission deployment through policy support, some targeted programs, and also working through with the state to make sure transit agencies have a clear vision of where to get funding to support zero emission deployment overall. Goal 4 will help to develop a skilled and sustainable workforce to support long-term zero emission deployment, also led by the state agencies, especially CARB, since they adopted this regulation. I think it's great for them to start thinking about better resources for the transit agencies, especially in the area of sustainable workforce to meet the operational needs of this new technology. Goal 5 will help to integrate transit and freight planning to unlock some of the shared zero emission opportunities, and it will be led by the transit agencies and the various track owners. We do understand this one can be a little bit complex because of all the different underlines of having the private sector versus and the transit agencies coordinate. But we have outlined some steps to sort of kick off that discussion and that coordination. And we hope that through this effort, we'll be able to come up with something that would help identify some shared resources for trucks and also for transit agencies where it's possible to do so. As I mentioned earlier on, we also developed a toolkit, which is meant to support the transit agencies as they think about how to deploy zero-emission vehicles. And it does include a focus fact sheets designed to translate some of the complex data that's involved in zero-emission deployment, where to start, where to go, some of the processes, some of the state policies and the permitting guidelines, to translate all of that in a way that's easily accessible by the transit agencies to support them. And so this toolkit does include a zero emission technology selection framework. We know that a lot of the transit agencies are really trying to figure out, should I go for battery electric vehicles or hydrogen fuel cell vehicles? So this is a pathway to support them to decide based on their fleet, based on their route, based on their grade, and also the supporting infrastructure they have. It also includes a utility engagement starter kit, permitting and approval checklist, smart charging fact sheet, funding roadmap, which we spelled out some of the funding sources that are available at the federal and state and local and regional sources for the transit agencies to at least have an overview of what's available and what could be utilized for zero emission deployments as they think about their long-term strategic plans. And of course, workforce training fact sheet that provides where to start, where to go, who to coordinate with to kick off your workforce to get them better prepared for zero emission deployments in your agency. Here is a quick overview of what's going to be included in the final report that we do hope to publish by the end of this month. It does include an executive summary, a context and study objectives, best practices findings, some of the key findings from the existing conditions and the regional readiness assessment, some of the challenges and opportunities that we identify, and also the implementation action plan and several appendixes, including the toolkit as well. I also wanted to share that we did include some of the highlights in the staff report as well, in case you wanted to take a look at that, to give you sort of an overview of what's included or what will be included in the final report. In terms of next steps, we are currently reviewing a revised draft final report, which we do plan to share with the Regional Transit TAG for feedback, as well as some of our key stakeholders that helped us to get to this point. And then we're hoping to have the report finalized by the end of this month. But coordination will continue across board as we figure out what would be helpful for the transit agencies overall. We do plan to also have a Toolbox Tuesday at the end of the study, especially after the report is finalized, to share the toolkit and also some of the key findings from the study across our region once the final report is finalized and published. And then we also will incorporate some of the key findings from the study into Connect SoCal. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Well, Priscilla, thank you very much for the presentation. This is a big change, and it kind of really reflects our previous speaker. You know, these are the tools to get us into a better position. So great. I think I saw a hand raised earlier. We'll start in the room here. Do we have any comments? I see none. So we will move on to Art Bishop. I see your hand up.
Good. Just real quick, thank you so much for your report. It sort of goes back to the one size doesn't fit everybody. One, when we talk about funding gaps, our ridership within our bus areas are having a real problem being able to keep our riderships up. We're really down on it. So the funding gap issue to be able to maintain the buses is a real concern with me. And then because of our area is such a large area, and I know a lot of cities down below where I came from in Orange County, the city was 3 square miles. Our area is over 500 square miles, and electric buses do not work up here because they just can't make the whole route. So I know we're looking at technology to try to solve all the problems in the room, but I'm just not sure we're at the point that we're going to get there, at least not in the timeline of the next 5 years. Thank you.
I understand your concern. I think that's also shared across a lot of the transit agencies that have similar issues too. So thank you.
Mayor Brian Johns. Floor is yours. Oh, Mayor Brian Johns, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Hey, just a quick question about one of the items on goal 2 regarding working with the California CPUC. I serve on our Omnitrans board, which is the bus agency for everything in San Bernardino County that isn't up in the high desert. And we've been looking at this, and one of the issues that staff brought up was, I guess for lack of a better word, the permitting when it comes to working with like SoCal Edison or other public utilities. Is that what the CPUC, is that why CPUC is mentioned on there, or is there another kind of angle? Because it seems like we hit a lot of snags and a lot of delays when it comes to working with them.
I'm trying to bring up the slide. Let me see. I apologize. I just want to make sure I'm giving you
you're good.
Right response. Yes, for goal two, we do understand that a lot of things that has to do with things like agreements, having something that's more streamlined would have to be coordinated and supported by the CPUC. And so we do understand that it could take a little longer for some of these things to happen, but at least having them as a state lead or supporting this role would be very beneficial for the transit agencies. Eventually, when it comes to infrastructure, transit agencies mainly have to start with their utility companies. So whatever it's in their various jurisdictions, whoever the private vendor would be for, depending on what service they plan to have, whether it's hydrogen fuel cell or battery electric, they would have to start from there. But what we're really looking forward to CPUC helping with in some of the streamlining with some of the agreements, because sometimes even with private-public partnerships, it could be a little confusing, especially for the transit agencies, and some of them express this too. So getting we're looking forward to the CPUC helping us to have some kind of a formal or standardized way for the transit agencies to be able to better coordinate with whatever private partners or whoever they plan to work with, to have the infrastructure that they need for the zero emission vehicles. And so their role is really in a supporting role, but whatever happens, we're really hoping that, again, this is something that was articulated through the Transit Transformation Task Force to having more support for the transit agencies through the state agencies. And so we're hoping that CPUC would be able to support the transit agency and also limit some of the long term that it takes for the transit agencies to get through some of these processes. So that is really why we put them here, to support in that role.
And I think that's fantastic. And I think to the earlier item where we were talking about, the left hand of the state government doesn't know what the right hand is doing. If we can have, the folks at CPUC actually help with streamlining and making sure that these projects that are needed actually, get pushed through. I think that's a great thing. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your question, and I see no one else, so I have one myself. You had mentioned earlier the larger agencies were faster to adopt these programs and their transition, and the rollout for the smaller ones was basically just for compliance, just trying to get into the, get in the move. But what are the challenges? What do you see as the biggest challenges at these smaller providers that may be keeping them from, scaling and getting up to speed on it?
I think we see, number one, it's the issue of which technology pathway to adopt. Again, depending on what routes they have. Do they have longer routes, shorter routes? Would they be able to meet their needs? That's one of the key things that really affect the smaller transit agencies. Number two, definitely is the supporting infrastructure. And so one of the things that we've been looking into is thinking of more shared opportunities for the transit agencies. So Foothill Transit has been working with Montebello bus lines to get a shared opportunity for them. So Montebello, they were trying to formalize an agreement. Unfortunately, they lost the Arches funding that was going to make that possible. So that's a whole different thing on the funding side.
Yeah.
But in the long term, really, I guess having some of those shared opportunities for the transit agencies would be helpful, knowing that if I get stuck across the street, I would be able to get help. Sunline Transit, even with how far they've gone, they experienced some of these delays. And when we spoke to their CEO the last time, she mentioned the fact that if we had anyone close to us, we could fall temporarily while we were trying to fix our issues, that would be helpful. So that's one of the issues that some of the transit agencies, especially the smaller ones, are facing. The other thing is workforce. It's a whole new technology. To deploy technology, you have to train your workforce, and already we're dealing with workforce issues from a whole different perspective. And so bringing in a new technology, you would have to train, you have to work with your union if you are dealing with unions to make sure that it aligns with whatever their goals and those contractual agreements are. So those are some of the issues that affect a lot of the transit agencies. Will we be able to meet everything that has to do with this new technology? What if it fails? What if something happens? What do we do? You may be aware OCTA had a hydrogen fuel cell station that is not functioning anymore because of agreement issues between Trillium and Air Products. And so that facility is just sitting there and it's not functioning. And it's supposed to be one of the biggest, or supposed to happen, or supposed to fuel at least about 50 hydrogen fuel cell buses. And now it's just not happening. So when they purchase hydrogen fuel cell buses, now they have to go outside the yard and go fuel whenever it's available. And so those are some of the challenges. What happens with operational issues and just ongoing maintenance even after you build these infrastructure facilities. And so some of those things just deters the smaller agencies. They're like, they're not ready for all of these things. So,
Well, thank you for that. Because, when we speak on these programs of getting them moving, we have to be able to present those in our conversations too as a lookout. So, because I want to see the smaller ones be more successful, because in our areas, and you heard earlier from the other speaker, of more remote areas, those are very important. And then that lesson learned about the hydrogen fueling is something to consider too. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Well, that was a great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our last item. And this is a good one. I know this is all the talk lately. The item number 6 is data center energy and water use. So I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to present this item.
Good morning, everyone. So we have 2 presenters today. One will focus on water and one will focus on energy. The first up will be Eric Massanet. He's professor and Mellichamp Chair of Sustainability Science for Emerging Technologies, UC Santa Barbara, and a faculty science at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. He'll be followed by Nell Green-Nyland, a senior research fellow at the Wheeler Water Institute at UC Berkeley's Center for Law, Energy, and Environment. So we'll kick it off. Should be a great discussion.
Okay, shall I go?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks to the committee and everyone for the invitation to speak with you today. I'm Eric Massanet. I'm a professor at UC Santa Barbara. And I always have to say that in these sorts of presentations, the views are my own and don't reflect the UC or the Department of Energy or Lawrence Berkeley National Labs official positions. So I was asked to give a primer, but also to give you some sense of how we estimate data center energy use, because as I think the previous speaker alluded to, we hear about data centers pretty much every day now, about data centers gobbling up huge amounts of energy or water, or causing local air pollution issues, or noise pollution for residents that are located near data centers. And one thing I'd like you to know is that every one of these stories is usually based on some numbers or some factoids about the amount of energy or the amount of water or the amount of pollution. And those numbers can come from a wide variety of sources. They can come from bloggers, they can come from journalists. And what I want you to know is that, you should really be looking for numbers that come from the scientific community. And that's the community that I'm a part of. So in my research, I'm in the field of energy analysis, and I've been focusing on data centers for about 20 years now. In fact, when I got started in data centers, it was due to the fact that Congress, the US Congress, became interested in the growth of data center power use way back in 2006. They had no idea what was coming, nor did we, but that was the very first study that was published for the US. And, people like me get asked these questions all the time. How much energy do data centers use? Where is that energy going? And importantly now, for a lot of policymakers, what do we do to bend the curve towards more sustainable outcomes? So at the US national level, we have published 3 of these studies to date. I'll give you a little bit of a summary of the most recent one from 2024, but I also want you to know that any number you see is generally an estimate coming from an analyst who's using a model. And answering these questions from top to bottom gets more complex, it requires more data, and there are a lot of uncertainties that build up as we go from trying to understand how much energy is used today to what can we do about it in the future. And the main reason for that is you might say, well, why are we making estimates? Why do we need models? The fact of the matter is that we don't collect official statistics on the data center sector. Most of the reporting that data center operators do is voluntary. So I provided a link to an article here that's open access. It's by a colleague in the field who did a recent stock take of the sort of data we need in the analyst community. That's what you see here. I highlighted in the column, the rows there. Those are the sort of data we need: electricity consumption, water use, and so forth. We need those data from many different sorts of data center operators, but some of the big hitters are here. And if you just scan the table quickly, what you'll notice is there are a lot of no's here, right? A lot of companies don't report their electricity use or their water use or their emissions. And that's why we need models to estimate how much of these resources are being consumed and where they're going. To get back to the primer aspect, so I recognize data centers are something that are in the public, sort of conscious now all the time. But I want to sort of peel back what's a data center and how do they use energy. So essentially a data center, as you probably can envision if you haven't been in one already, it's a big building with racks that are full of IT equipment, server, storage devices, network equipment, all the IT devices we need to make the internet run. This is what makes a data center company money, right? This is where they add value. That's the IT equipment side of the data center. But in order to keep the IT equipment running at the right temperature and reliably, and to make sure that there's enough backup power, data centers also require a lot of infrastructure equipment, such as cooling systems. So if you've ever actually worked on your lap with your laptop, you'll notice that your legs get warm. That's heat that's generated by every IT device, but you can imagine that a data hall that's jam-packed with IT devices generates a lot of heat. That heat has to be removed in order to keep the IT equipment operating in the right temperature zone, which means it won't fail, it'll be reliable, and so forth. So on top of all the energy we need to run the IT equipment, there's a lot of energy that's needed to cool the data center, to power the data center, to have backup power, and so forth. So when we think about the energy use of data centers, we need to think about all of these elements. It's not just the servers, it's everything that's needed to run a data center. And all of this really adds up, as I'll discuss. Okay. So as I mentioned, since we don't have reported data, analysts like me need to estimate these numbers. And in fact, going back 20 years, we developed models of the data center sector. These models are getting better all the time. The model that I work with my colleagues at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab is pictured here. It would take me an hour to explain it, but just so you know, there's a lot of detail that goes into these models so that we can understand the type of data center, the location of data center, how hot is the climate, how much water will it need, how much cooling energy, and so forth. And these are the sort of numbers you want to look for when you're making policy decisions or, informing discussions, right? Don't look to the blogger, don't look to the news article, look to the scientific literature. But the fact of the matter is different groups have different models. Here I'm showing you a graph, which was presented by EPRI. This is a wonderful industry think tank, Electric Power Research Institute, who published the most recent projections for the United States data center energy use. And if you just take a look at the right-hand side of the graph, what you'll see is even with models and analyst assumptions and the data we can find, there's huge variance in these estimates. And if you just look to the right-hand side, what you'll see is a factor of 5 difference in analyst predictions for the electricity use of data centers in the year 2030. That's only 4 short years away, right? And our models are telling us it could be anywhere between a few hundred terawatt hours to over 1,000 terawatt hours. So always remember that these things come with uncertainty, right? So let me talk a little bit about California. California is the birthplace of all the technology, the home of the original data centers. We've got all the credibility for the historical story when it comes to data centers. We're still an important state for data centers. There are a lot of data centers up north, fewer down here in the south. But what's happening, as you'll see, is the eastern half of the US is really becoming where a lot of major data center builds are happening, in Texas, in Virginia, in the Midwest, in Utah now in the West, and so forth. That's not to say that data centers won't continue to be important from an energy and water perspective in California. They are, but a lot of builds are happening outside of California. But we want to make sure, in my view, my personal view, that the builds that we have here in the state are sustainable from energy and water perspective. So that's kind of the picture of what's happening in California. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the challenges for people like me, researchers, who estimate the energy use of data centers today and where that energy use might be going in the future. And I'm going to step through quite a few of them fairly quickly, just to give you a sense of what we're up against. So the first challenge is neatly summarized on this graph. So what are we looking at here? Well, the x-axis at the bottom, those are years, and the y-axis is a metric for the power capacity of data centers. These are measured in megawatts or gigawatts. And if you look to the history of data centers, and this is for the United States as a whole, and what we're seeing are the builds that occurred each year, historically, and the ones that are projected. Estimating the energy use of this sector was more tractable, let's say, before the AI boom started in around 2022 or 2023. Since then, just look at the shape of that graph, right? The number of builds are growing, the number of planned data centers are growing astronomically. So keeping track of the projects, how big they'll be, where they'll be located is a really big challenge for researchers. Part of that challenge is some of these announced sites will eventually get canceled or stalled or won't come to fruition, right? So keeping track of what's actually real and what's not is an important challenge. And you might say, well, what if you miss a couple data centers or two? And that's probably not a big deal in your overall estimates. And the truth is, in the old days, that used to be true, right? So what I'm showing you here is a big data center before AI. This is a Facebook data center in Ashburn, Virginia, 70 megawatts, excuse me, of power capacity. That was really big prior to, let's say, 2022. That's about the power you need on average for 50,000 homes. The data centers that are being built now in the US to fuel the AI boom are 10 times as large as that data center you see there, which used to be among the biggest on the planet, a few years ago. Now the data center builds are much larger. What does that mean? Well, we have to keep better track of them because they're much larger. And if you miss a few, of course, your estimates aren't correct. But these are so large that they can place an enormous strain on electricity grids. And as Nell will talk about, demand a lot of water. And in fact, this graph on the right is showing some projects around the country from Epoch AI. These are about gigawatt scale data centers. These are 10 times the size of the largest ones in the old days. But if you're following the news, a data center project was just approved in Utah for 9 gigawatts. That's 90 times the size of that small data center there on the left. So these are massive data centers, and we really need to understand their energy use just given their scales, right? The challenge here is that a lot of these projects are being built in somewhat of a secret manner. So a lot of these projects are under NDAs with the local developers, meaning the public, researchers like me, policymakers like you may never see what's being built because those details are staying hidden. And I've gone to Sacramento, I've gone to speak before Congress in DC to tell them that this is a big barrier for the research community. We don't know what's being built today, given the scales and the technologies that could be involved. We have a really difficult time informing you all about what that means for your local grids or your water supplies. So this is a challenge for us. Challenge number 3. Another challenge is if we understand what's being built and where it's being built, a lot of these, the one thing for you to understand is if there's a 1 gigawatt data center that's planned for, who knows, Southern California, right? That gigawatt might not be used 24/7. It might never be used at 1 gigawatt. And that's because all data centers run at a level that's lower than their stated capacity. Why is that? Well, they never want to have outages. They never want to push themselves to the brink. So on average, these data centers are running at 75, 80% capacity, maybe 50% capacity. These are still large loads, but we don't have to be scared by let's say, the stated power capacity of these data centers always, because often they'll run at lower levels, but there will be peaks, as you see here on the right. So when it's hot outside in the summer months, the cooling systems need to use more power to keep that data center cool. And these peaks used to be, something we would pay attention to in the old days, but now they're really critical for grid stress, because if we're in the middle of July in Southern California and we have data centers that are using peak cooling loads and everyone else is running their air conditioners, suddenly the grid is in trouble. And if we're charging EVs and so forth. So we need to pay attention to these peaks moving forward, which is another challenge because we don't have the data we need to estimate that. Another moving part, 5th challenge, is that, as I mentioned, a lot of projects are being delayed or stalled, or they're moving from one place to another due to local opposition. In my view, this is a good thing that communities are demanding more information and are empowered to make decisions about what's being built in their local communities. If they're for data centers, great. If they're against them, they have the right to, to sort of push back, right? But this is a trend we're seeing play out all around the country. My lab, because we have to pay attention to policies to make more accurate predictions about the future, we track data center policies around the world and around the country. This is a snapshot from one of our recent database updates, and there's a lot here, but just look at the shape of that curve again. And what we're seeing is there's been a huge number of policies appearing all around the country, right here in California as well, that are starting to regulate data centers or attempting to. how large they can be, what their efficiency levels should be, what their cooling technology should be. This is something that I think is playing out in real time, but policymakers and communities need better information to sort of get these things right. Data center siting. In the past, what you're seeing here are the main criteria for siting data centers in the US. They need sufficient power. They need to be located next to near a substation for reliable power. They need to have water. They need to have fiber. They need to have the land. They need to have tax incentives. They need to have the right workers. All of these things are important siting considerations that are driving where data centers go. However, what's changed is the race for power, given how large these data centers are. Many of them can't connect to the grid, in a reasonable amount of time from their perspective. We're seeing delays of 6 months, 10 months, 2 years, 3 years, depending on the grid region. So a lot of operators are bypassing the grid. Here's a story from the New York Times, wonderful summary of the issue, that shows that a lot of large data center sites are now bypassing the grid and planning to install on-site power generation. So mostly natural gas on-site turbines. Why is this an issue? Well, for one, we don't have a sense of where these things are playing out necessarily. But number two, these are turbines that aren't as efficient as a natural gas generator on the grid. They cause local pollution for the communities that are around them. They distribute pollution in a much more distributed way than used to be the case with one central power station. So this is another challenge for understanding the implications of energy use for data centers. That said, I would be remiss and frankly wrong if I didn't mention the other side of the coin, which is that, this is an industry that has tremendous potential for innovation. They've always innovated. So the computing technologies are getting a lot more efficient. The cooling technologies are getting a lot more efficient. A lot of this is driven by power constraints and community pushback and policy. But this is also an industry that can respond with the right guardrails because they've always innovated on the efficiency side. The challenge we have today is we're still building because there's a lot of speculation. No one wants to be left behind. So a lot of these efficiency gains are being eaten up by, just building more essentially. But it must be said that there's a lot of efficiency potential being tapped, and that remains for this industry. And the other thing that's hard is, if we think about emissions or air pollution or environmental justice issues, these tech companies, they're among the richest companies in the world. They tend to invest in renewable projects or breakthrough technologies elsewhere. If they have to build a data center today using fossil fuels or on-site generation, they tend to build a wind farm in some other place to offset that power use. And they're investing in things like geothermal and nuclear fusion. These are technologies that might help us all bend the curve. So it's not that it's all, doom and gloom with growth, because at the same time, what we're seeing is these companies move the needle on clean energy and other goals. And I wanted to acknowledge that. Where do we think US data center energy use is headed? I'll be wrapping up shortly. Our latest projections from the LBNL study, and this was only the third study that Congress has commissioned for the United States in 20 years. We need more studies at much greater frequency. Once every 7 years isn't enough to track this industry. But what we estimated was that, data center energy use is rising. That's the black and white graphic you see there. No doubt about it. It's likely to continue to rise, may reach between 7 and 12% of national electricity use. Moving forward, that there's a lot of uncertainty in those projections, but we can tell you what's driving that. A lot of it is AI computing and the shifts to very large data centers, which is what you see there in the bottom graph. So I was asked to quickly comment on, well, what does this all mean? Is that a lot? Is it a little? And my answer to this is it depends, right? So at the global scale, on the left, what you're seeing is comparison of projected data center electricity growth, which is very large globally, compared to other end uses of electricity. So electric vehicles, we need those. Heat pumps in buildings, we need those. More air conditioning so that people in hot developing countries have decent living standards. We need those. So when we look at it this way, data center electricity use seems to be fairly small compared to all these other societal needs. And at that level, it's true. However, data centers, can create a lot of local stress. And if we look north to Santa Clara, that's the biggest hotspot that we have in the state for data centers. Their data centers use 60%, by some estimates from Stanford University, 60% of the local power grid is to fuel data centers. So that story about data centers being small at the global level, that's true, but it breaks down at the local level. The same is true for water, which I think Nell will cover. So let me just tell you quickly what we need to bend the curve. These are 8 things that I'll go through very quickly that are happening, but need to happen at an accelerated pace if we want to avoid the worst energy outcomes from data centers. The first is they've got to be sited in the right places. So maximizing renewables, minimizing water stress, and that's not necessarily happening today. The data centers, number 2, need strict efficiency standards that they can reach. We can estimate what those are, what those are like, what levels of PUE and WE, these are metrics and so forth. That can be done, but it needs strong efficiency guardrails from policymakers. The third thing is there's a growing trend to recover waste heat from data centers. This is a real opportunity because those large data centers that are consuming maybe 1 gigawatt or 2 gigawatts of power, we don't lose that energy. It's conserved. And what happens is it gets transferred into heat. If we can capture that heat and use it to provide heat to an industrial facility or to heat a building, what we do is we save energy in those other sectors. So if we can encourage more waste heat recovery, we'll reduce the net energy impacts of data centers substantially because there is a way to recover that energy. And compared to like if you're driving your car, the energy in your gallon of gas, that's pretty much gone, right? It goes into motion and then heat gets radiated out into the atmosphere. Not true for data centers. The fourth is data centers need to be flexible. So with their loads, shift their loads in response to the grid, move loads around. We have to pay attention to peaks. That's something that policymakers need to be aware of because they can be very substantial stresses on energy and water resources. And then the last few, 6, 7, and 8, we need much greater transparency from this industry. I've been talking about this for many years. I'll continue to talk about it. We're not where we need to be, but we don't necessarily need to be all doom and gloom about AI because there's a lot of innovation. If we can develop smaller models, more efficient models for specific problems, we can save a lot of energy compared to using the really large ones like ChatGPT or Gemini, right? And then the last thing is the tech industry likes to point to the potential for AI to solve problems, like make logistics more efficient, make our buildings more efficient. Maybe we'll solve cancer through having AI or, that sort of thing, discover new drugs. There are a lot of wonderful things that AI might be able to do. And so we probably in the future need to start thinking about the costs of AI, which you're looking at here, and the benefits of AI. However, the benefits of AI, we don't have the data, we don't have the modeling frameworks, we don't have the science yet to accurately estimate those benefits. But I think as a society, we need to get better at that because there are applications of AI that we should be promoting and using, but there are guardrails that we need in place. And if we don't keep our eyes on that net balance, which we can't do presently, we kind of lose sight of the big picture. So that's my presentation. Thank you for the attention. I hope this was informative to you. And the last thing I'll say, if anyone wants to learn about anything related to this presentation, just reach out to me at UCSB. I'd be happy to have conversations.
All right. In the interest of time, let's move directly on to Nell, and then we can take questions afterwards. So Nell, you are up.
Great. And I think you folks are sharing these slides and I'm going to advance them. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so. It should be coming up here very soon.
Well, while my slides are coming up, good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here today to talk with you about data center water use. And it's great that Eric went first and provided that context that he was able to share and kind of gave you some hints as to what I might be talking about with water as well. So let's see if the slide advances. I think I clicked it, but let's see if it goes forward. There we go. I'm a researcher at the Center for Law, Energy, and the Environment at UC Berkeley, where my work focuses on adapting water management institutions to meet changing needs and build resilience for people and ecosystems. I was invited to talk with you because I co-authored a recent report on data center water use and how it's regulated in California. Like Eric, I want to say that the views I'm going to be sharing are my own, and they're not necessarily those of UC Berkeley or of the entities that funded the research that is behind my presentation. To give you a bit of a roadmap, today I'm going to touch on the following topics. First, why it's important to consider data center water use. Next, key ways to reduce data center water use and its impacts. Then what the policy and regulatory framework for data center water use looks like in California. And then some recommendations we have for addressing key information and policy gaps. Finally, I'm going to point you towards some resources that may be helpful if you're interested in exploring data center water issues in more detail. So let's start with why it's important to consider data center water use. Eric already brought up this figure, in fact, and really the big changes we're seeing in the data center industry. Yes, data centers have been around for a long time. However, the rapidly expanding use of generative AI is now driving a boom in data center development, with more and larger data centers planned and under construction around the world. One effect of the data center boom is growing demand on water resources. How do data centers use water? First, their water use, I want to mention, can be direct or indirect. And most direct water use is related to cooling, as Eric already flagged. Servers and data centers generate heat, and data centers often use water to dissipate or remove that heat. AI data centers need more processing power and generate more heat than conventional ones, and that increases cooling needs. Data centers also use water indirectly in various ways. This indirect use can be harder to measure sometimes, but estimates suggest that it can equal and often actually greatly exceeds direct water use. The power plants that generate the electricity data centers need use water. It takes water to produce all the microprocessors and other components that make up a data center supply chain. Water also gets used during data center construction, such as when laying concrete, producing concrete, and for dust control during construction. But data center construction and operation can also affect local water quantity and quality in other ways. For example, groundwater is often pumped out of a construction site in a process called dewatering before excavation begins. Data centers also produce wastewater that needs to be treated and may be discharged into a public sewer system or sometimes directly to a local waterway. The amount of water data centers use isn't uniform, and neither are the impacts of their use on local water supplies, communities, and ecosystems. Instead, water use and impacts will depend on things like the size, design, and water use characteristics of data centers, the nature and characteristics of their water sources that they're using, and other details of the specific local, social, environmental, and hydrological context within which they operate. So the rising demand for new and larger data centers is definitely being met with growing concerns about water impacts and certainly about other impacts as well. While adding data centers in some areas might not have major water impacts, in other areas, new data centers could have significant negative impacts on local water supplies and those who depend on them. So California is already home to hundreds of data centers, but their numbers and the size of new data centers keep growing. As Eric kind of mentioned, some of the expansion, a lot of the expansion is happening in other parts of the country, but there's definitely new data centers proposed here in California and going in California. Data center growth is happening in many water stress regions in the US. The map on the right shows parts of the country with a high risk of water stress, while the map on the left highlights the areas with the fastest recent data center growth and the largest projected increases in data center capacity. There's a lot of overlap between sort of the orange areas on the right and the data points on the left. So additionally, while most older data centers were constructed in urban areas, most new data center development is happening in rural areas, which may have smaller and more vulnerable water and wastewater systems and less capacity to thoroughly evaluate the local pros and cons of specific data center proposals. My co-authors and I looked into what is known about data center water use and its impacts. Much of what we know comes from high-level summaries in corporate sustainability reports and researchers' estimates. These estimates range from around 18,000 gallons per day for smaller data centers to 500,000 gallons or more per day for a hyperscale data center. The magnitude of these high-level estimates indicates that data centers can have large water footprints, but specific local level data on water use and related impacts are rarely available. Reporting requirements are extremely limited. Eric mentioned non-disclosure agreements. Corporate sustainability reports are voluntary, and most of the companies that prepare them provide only aggregate water consumption and use data across their operations. More precise information can be difficult to find because many data center owners and operators view their operational data, including cooling system details and water use data, as proprietary. The lack of specific data can make it hard to assess how much water data centers use, what efficient water use looks like, what water sources data centers are actually drawing from, and the true local impacts of their water use, as well as how those impacts compare to other local water uses. Since it's difficult to manage what you don't measure, these information gaps also make it hard to develop effective strategies for managing data centers' water impacts. Regardless, it's clear that local communities bear the brunt of the impacts of data center development, including water impacts. Local governments also determine whether and under what conditions a data center can be built. They must consider a proposed data center's potential impacts, both positive and negative, and weigh them against the needs of existing residents and industries. Ultimately, they will decide when expected gains, economic and otherwise, justify the additional strain on local resources. Yet these local decision makers lack key information and guidance on how to understand and address data center water use. It's also important to note here that data centers' water and energy use are intertwined and may present some trade-offs that complicate the picture. Now I want to talk briefly about some of the key ways to reduce data center water use and its impacts. So data center developers have options. The main ways that they can reduce a data center's water impacts are to site them in cooler areas, areas with less water stress, areas where they can access renewable energy, which tends to be less water intensive than other energy sources, using recycled water, and selecting less water intensive cooling systems. Because more water efficient cooling strategies often require more energy, it's important to consider water and energy impacts together. So my colleagues and I also looked at what state and local governments are doing to manage data center water impacts. In particular, we focused on the policy and regulatory landscape for direct data center water use in California. We found that data center water use is mostly governed by a patchwork of policies and regulations that affect data center water use, but they don't specifically regulate it in general. This patchwork has many gaps and inconsistencies in it. Data center projects must generally undergo environmental review, including of their water-related impacts. Depending on a data center specifications, this may include a water supply assessment by potential water suppliers. For example, a water supply assessment is required for a proposed industrial development with more than 650,000 square feet of floor area, or that would use an amount of water equivalent to either a 500-unit residential development or a 10% increase in the connections of a small public water system that has 5,000 or fewer connections. Notably, a recent study by researchers at Santa Clara University suggests that little information about data center water use or water-related impacts is publicly disclosed in environmental review documents in California. Various state and local laws, regulations, and policies govern water access and use more generally. They include rules that determine what a data center must do to gain access to a particular water source, what limits and conditions apply, and the scope and nature of any monitoring and reporting requirements. Requirements vary for different water source types and from place to place. Many data centers rely on water service provided by a public water system or another water utility. Some data centers withdraw water directly from a river or aquifer and are therefore subject to state water right reporting requirements or local groundwater management rules, but none of these are really specific to data centers, and they don't necessarily collect information about which water users are data centers. Some local governments have developed recycled water policies, water efficiency requirements, or incentives of various types that are relevant to data centers, but usually don't target them specifically. Our literature review and regulatory mapping work revealed some clear opportunities to improve transparency around data centers' water use and encourage mitigation of their water-related impacts. However, today those opportunities remain largely untapped. So therefore, I want to touch briefly on some recommendations that we have for addressing key information and policy gaps in California. First, the state can take steps to improve water use data collection and transparency. Existing reporting requirements are really limited and have not provided a clear understanding of data center water use in California. The state can expand requirements for data center operators to report their anticipated and actual water use, because this is rarely actually ever reported, regardless of which water sources they draw from. The resulting data could form the basis for developing performance metrics and standards, inform local governments' development decisions, and support further policy and regulatory actions at both the state and local levels. The state can also actively work to build local capacity to evaluate and address the water impacts of proposed data center projects by analyzing the data it collects and providing guidance, technical assistance, and tools to help local governments make informed decisions. Local governments themselves can, of course, really grapple with those decisions that they're making locally and try to analyze their options and understand the implications of them. They can also establish requirements and incentives for reducing data centers' water footprints. For example, they can use land use, planning, and zoning tools to encourage or require efficient water use, or to require the use of recycled water. The data center industry itself can explicitly and transparently consider local water-related impacts when making data center siting and design decisions. It can also include site-specific water use data in corporate sustainability reports. Providing water use data in context will help make water and energy trade-offs more explicit and help regulators and communities understand data centers' true impacts. We also think companies that are able to show they are making siting choices and investing in technologies that reduce both water and energy consumption will not only build operational resilience for themselves, but they'll also strengthen their social license to operate. So kind of in conclusion, the current boom in data center development could have significant repercussions for local water resources in some places. Currently, California citizens and decision makers are operating at a disadvantage. Lack of information hinders our understanding of local and statewide water impacts. The speed and scale of data center development warrants coordinated data collection and analysis before development significantly outpaces oversight and creates too many permanent impacts. The good news is that there are obvious steps state and local leaders and the tech industry can take to increase transparency and improve data center siting and design decisions. By taking these steps, they can collectively reduce data centers' water impacts on local water resources and the ecosystems and communities that depend on them. Before I close, I want to quickly point you towards some resources that may be helpful if you're interested in exploring data center water issues and what to do about them in more detail. So I'll point to two California-focused resources. So one is the report that I co-authored with my colleagues at CLE. And then the second one is a recent study of data center water use information and the environmental justice implications of data center water use that I already mentioned by Santa Clara University and Next 10. I've also included some other resources that look at data center water issues in other parts of the country, or more broadly, as well as Climate Exchange's growing series of state policy toolkits for data center regulation. Climate Exchange tracks state-level bills related to data centers, and their toolkits distill information on potential policy tools for addressing water impacts, electricity affordability and reliability, and transparency and accountability. And I think they are producing more more toolkits that focus on different topics and are continuing to do that, and we'll have more in the future. So I just want to mention that my presentation today, again, was based on research that my colleagues and I did with support from grants from the Internet Society Foundation, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. I hope this was a helpful introduction to data center water issues, and thanks very much for listening. And like Eric, I'd be happy to talk more or answer questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Both of you and Eric were amazing information. And so you look at this exponential growth of these data centers, the sense of urgency is here. So thank you for that. Quick comments from members. We're very short on time. So Margaret, I see you're requesting to speak.
Yes. First of all, Eric, I'm a gaucho my first semester before I transferred to UCLA. For now, I really appreciate, well, both of you on this information, because I am Rosemead City Council. I'm half a block out of Monterey Park, who just Tuesday trounced their data centers. They're not allowed to have it. And but my big issue is the drought issue, where when we're in a severe drought, we can't water our lawns this day or that day and everything. And people are going to be really upset if they know that these data centers are just drinking it, using all of our water, and I have to manage all mine. So I appreciate that, and I hope there's more information on that. So thank you so much for this.
Absolutely. Conservation is important. Member Crossway?
Yeah, just real quick. I wanted to share that when I went on the, oh gosh, I can't think what the committee was called. When I went with the assembly members on the delegation to Japan, that we actually visited a company that's working on technology that would change the way that data centers would be built. And if they're successful, it would allow them to do it with less energy because it wouldn't create the heat. It would use a completely different technology. They'd be able to put the cells closer together. Right now, they have to be more spread out because they create so much heat. And so they're hoping within the next 2 to 5 years that they'll be able to start rolling out this technology that would reduce the energy and the water usage of data centers. But then so that you could get more capacity within the same footprint of what you have now. So there are people, I know one of the speakers mentioned innovation. There are people that are trying to work on that technology. I don't know what the incentive will be for people to switch over to it, depending, I don't know what the cost, if they'll do a cost benefit. So that'll be a whole nother thing, but there is technology being worked on that could help with some of these issues.
Well, thank you for that comment. I think that's very important. And while we are kind of pressed on time, I think our environment is the most critical thing that we have to protect. And I appreciate both Nell and Eric for your offer to reach out to you for further conversation. So thank you very much for the presentation. It is the talk of the town right now, and you're very valued. Thank you. All right, moving on. This time I'm going to briefly go through our chair report here, just to talk about Connect SoCal Subcommittee. On May 7th, SCAG Regional Council voted to establish special SoCal 2050 subcommittee to provide overarching policy leadership for the development for the Connect SoCal 2050 plan. So that's good. And a subcommittee will include 2 members from each of the 3 policy committees. So remember that, with representation from across the region, and may include up to 3 ex officio members to provide additional perspective. Subcommittee will meet 7 to 10 times between July of 26 and the winter of 28. And the SCAG clerk of the board, Maggie Aguilar, emailed members, you may have seen that, May 19th, and sent a reminder on Monday to solicit interest serving on the subcommittee. If you're interested, please reply back to Maggie through those emails and of your interest by 5 p.m. tomorrow. So staff will confirm Connect SoCal 2050 subcommittee membership and coordinate the subcommittee kickoff, and that'll be mid-June, so a week or so. Legislative update on SB 1087. This has been a big year for SCAG, the legislative front. 2 sponsored bills continuing, and they're continuing to progress through state legislature. For this subcommittee's knowledge, I wanted to provide an update on 1087. Senator Cabaldon presented by him, and that 1087 seeks to modernize SB 375, a landmark legislation that was created for the sustainable communities component of our regional plan. And over the past year, SCAG has worked with other large California metropolitan planning organizations. The MPOs include SACOG, SANDAG, MTC, ABAG, and Senator Cabaldon, and the bill which advocates for stronger tools in the region to implement the SCS increase and impact of regional greenhouse gas reduction plans to accelerate progress on state climate, housing, and transportation goals. So 1087 passed the appropriations, and the Senate floor. The bill is now in the Assembly pending committee assignment. So from here, I'll pass it on to Yvette Macias and talk about our senior governmental affairs issues.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. SCAG Government Affairs Officer Yvette Macias. I just have a quick update on the SCAG Federal Certification Review. The Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration will conduct the 2026 SCAG Federal Certification Review to evaluate the regional transportation planning process carried out by SCAG and its partners. This happens every 4 years by the FHWA and the FTA. Jointly, they complete a certification review, inviting the public to comment on SCAG's transportation planning process. Members of the public may provide both of these agencies with written comments by email or regular mail, and information and instructions to submit comments can be found on our SCAG website. And that completes my brief report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you for that. So before we close the meeting, I would like to give a warm welcome to our committee. And that will be to Victoria Garcia from the beautiful city of San Fernando. And also very thankful for our outgoing members, Corey Moss from the City of Industry, and Joe Kalmick, which usually sat right here in front of me, from Seal Beach. They'll both be missed, and we appreciate the time they spent on this committee and their thoughtful input during all the time. So with that, that should conclude our meetings today. So thank you very much for your time. Adjourned.